Now that you have components, how do you trigger them? How do you make them start up? And in Android, you have two ways of triggering components to start up. For activities, services, and broadcast receivers, the way of triggering them to start is by using something called as an intent. Now, I'll explain more details about intent later today, and then also in one of the later chapters. So if you need to start an activity, what do? You send an intent. Intent saying, start this activity. Intent saying, start an activity that does this kind of work. You can send what is called as an explicit intent or an implicit intent, as I'll explain in one of the later slides here. For content providers, the only way you access a content provider is by using a content resolver. Again, this is Android's way of doing things. Why should you do it this way? I don't have an answer. Android people decided that that's the way they are going to do it, and that's the way they do it. And we just make use of what they provide. Okay? You may have a different way of doing it, but that's okay. But then you will have to design your own platform. Okay? Android does it this way. Intent is if you have done any distributed systems courses, you would have heard things like inter-process communication and so on. Intents are a way of doing inter-process communication. Intra-process as well as inter-process communication. Okay? These are asynchronous message objects that can be used for activating components like activities, services, and broadcast receivers. Now, there are a lot of words here. Asynchronous message objects. Don't worry too much about that. It's a big group of words there. All that it means is an intent is a way of telling somebody to do something. That's all. If you want your friend to go and fetch a bottle of milk from Park and Shop, what do? You shout at them and say, just go by and bring me a bottle of milk from Park and Shop. If your friend is a good friend, he will listen to you and then he'll go and bring the thing. If he just ignores you, that's a different matter. But that's a way for you to communicate with the person. An intent is similarly a way you're requesting somebody to do something. And this is a structured way of requesting something. Okay? So that's why don't get scared by these words there. Those are formal definitions for what these things are. But in simple terms, it's just a way of triggering somebody to do something. When you send a message to somebody, you will have to specify what kind of action you are expecting them to do. Bring milk is an action that you expect to do. And URI of the data to act upon. In case you need to act upon some data, you will provide a uniform resource indicator, just like a URL and URI, uniform resource indicator, form a straightforward way of specifying what to act on in case you need to supply some information. Okay? For broadcast receivers, the message is the action being announced. Let's look at an example of how you will make use of an intent. This example you will see tomorrow in the example not tomorrow, next week. In the example you will see. Now, if I don't tell you anything, what do you think that is telling somebody? Plain English. Intent, welcome this. Menu, class. What is it telling? Saying, I am welcome. I am the welcome activity. I am asking menu activity to start up. That's what it is doing. That's what it is specifying here. So this is an intent object in which two pieces of information are supplied. This is what we call as an explicit intent. And then what are we specifying here? Plain English. What do you think this will do? If you call this method, what do you think this is going to do? Start activity. When you say start activity, you need to specify what activity to start, and that information is specified by an intent. Okay? Plain and simple. See, when you start reading examples and reading code like this, it no longer looks scary. Okay? So that's one thing that I want to convey to you. You will see a lot of terms being used in there, but if you read it as plain English, you will immediately understand what you're trying to do there. Okay? And when you write code also, please adopt clean ways of writing things like this. So don't write intent a.this.b.class. What does A and B mean? I don't know, right? Use meaningful names whenever you declare components. Use a meaningful name for that. It should be self-documenting. Okay? I have seen people doing these kind of things. Function A, method B, class C, and then you declare parameters D and E. We don't know what D and E are. Write down meaningful names there so that it is easy for you to understand 2 weeks down the road. Sometimes you don't even understand your own code, right? So that's one thing that I always stress upon people. Write self-documenting code. You should be able to read your own code. It should look like plain English being specified. Okay? So that's one thing. This is one way of starting an activity. This is what we call as an explicit intent. You are explicitly specifying, start this particular activity, and I'm currently at this particular activity. Okay? Where do you think this particular call would be inside? Where do you think this kind of a call would be included in? This should be inside the activity that is declared for welcome. There must be an activity named welcome, supported by a file called welcome.java, and inside where this must be included somewhere in there. And also, perhaps, by looking at this, you probably already guessed what this is trying to do, right? When you click, it is triggering for activity to be executed, right? Simple. So, you have two kinds of intents. You have explicit intents, where you explicitly specify the component's name that should respond to the intent. You're saying, this, start this component. Sometimes, you may just want to specify, let the Android system itself decide who is going to service this. For example, if you have a declaration like this, it says start activity. Obviously, you understand this. It says new intent and then intent action view. This is basically saying open a browser. Okay? Open a browser, and then what do you think this is? That is a URL. That's the second part you're saying. So this is what is called as an implicit intent. When you specify something like this, you are telling the Android framework saying, whatever browser is chosen by the user as the default browser, please start the default browser and open this particular URL in that default browser. So you are leaving it to the Android framework to make a decision on who is going to be invoked in order to service this particular request. That's why it is called as an implicit intent. Now, an intent filter is used by a component to specify to the Android framework saying, if somebody asks to open it, for example, in this case, if somebody asks to open a browser, invoke me. And that's how you declare to the Android framework saying, I am the one that is going to service a request like this. If somebody asks to make a call, start me, and I'm going to service it. And that you declare in the manifest file. I'm going to come back to that in the next class. Okay? Again, start looking at it as if you are telling somebody something. You are telling a story. You are informing people about how things are happening. Then it becomes very easy on how to structure an Android application. Okay? All right. So today is Wednesday, right? Okay, I'm going to stop here. We'll come back on Friday and continue the discussion. Coming back to intents, what we mentioned last time in the last class was that applications in Android are composed of activities, content providers, broadcast receivers, and what's the fourth one? Services. And we saw that the way you will start up an activity, a service, or a broadcast receiver is by sending an intent. An intent is a way of communicating to these components, asking them to do something. Okay? And for content providers, as we saw, it is the content providers are dealing with data. And so you're basically querying the content provider to get some information back. It's like accessing a database. And so content access from the content provider is done through the content resolver, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But intents are a primary mechanism for components to be able to communicate with other components. And we saw last time an example of how you can start an activity by issuing an explicit intent, as you see in this particular example. So this is an explicit intent. You can also do what are called as implicit intents. In implicit intents, what you're expressing to the system is saying, look, I want this kind of action to be done, but it is possible that the user already has a preferred mode, a preferred method of handling this particular item. Just make use of whatever the user uses normally. So for example, if you were using the regular browser, so in this particular example, you're trying to open this web page. Now, in a device, you might be using the standard browser that comes with Android, which is again based upon the WebKit, or you might have installed another browser. Say, for example, if you like Firefox Mobile, you might have installed Firefox Mobile on your device, or you might have installed Opera Mobile, and you use that as your primary browser. So, in that case, when you issue an implicit intent, the Android system identifies which particular application, which particular app is the one that you use for doing this kind of action, and then correspondingly, it will invoke that particular application to carry out this action. Okay. Similarly, for example, you can use similar kind of implicit intents for things like email, contacts, and many others. There are many other things. If you go to the Android developers website, there is a section called reference. Under there, you will see descriptions for each one of them, each one of these different kinds of things. So that's where you'll find more information about these things. So in terms of intents, as we saw, we have two ways of using intents. One is an explicit intent, where you explicitly specify who is going to do the action. That is, you explicitly identify the component which is going to carry out the action. Okay? Or you can do an implicit intent, whereby you let the Android system start up the most suitable component for handling that particular action. So two ways of activating any component within the system. Okay? Now, sorry, activities and services, as you see, will get started up when you need them. You don't need to explicitly shut them down. They will stay there. They will stay as long as is needed. And similarly, you don't need to shut them down explicitly. And similarly, if you want to get rid of them, you have to shut them down explicitly. But on the other hand, for content providers and broadcast receivers, you don't need to shut them down explicitly, because they will be started up only when needed, and when the corresponding action is done, they will shut themselves down automatically. Okay, so a content provider kicks in only when it is responding to a query that is issued using content resolver. Similarly, a broadcast receiver is only active when it is responding to a broadcast message. Once it is done, the broadcast receiver disappears. But on the other hand, activities and services will be sticking around within the system unless you get rid of them explicitly. There are ways that you can declare to the system saying, I am done with this activity, you can get rid of this activity, I don't need it anymore. And then the system will remove that activity. Later on, we will see why this might be useful for us. Okay. Similarly, components that have been activated might be shut down by the system if they are no longer used. And within Android, there is another way that components may be gotten rid of. When the system decides that it is running out of memory, it will get rid of components that are existing in memory. Now, we'll talk more about this later. Okay? So these are different ways that Android system handles things. You don't necessarily have to shut down everything. And some cases, it may be okay to just leave it around and let the system deal with it. Now, whenever you create an application, the manifest file is the place where you declare a lot of details about your application. And it is the manifest file that the Android system consults in order to understand what are the different components that are part of your application. So when you install the application, the Android system will look at your manifest file and then realize these are all the components that this particular application is providing. And if there are certain components that are willing to act in response to an implicit intent, that information will also be declared in the manifest file. And we make use of intent filters for doing that. I'll talk about that in a minute. What is this manifest file? If you saw the example in the lab yesterday, you would have seen that there is a specific file called the manifest file, and we manipulated it a little bit. Now, when you use Eclipse, what happens is when you create a project, the manifest file automatically gets created, and as you declare activities and so on, you have to add information about them into the manifest file. Okay? And also declare some special properties for them in there. The manifest file itself is nothing but a structured XML file. So that's why you're able to read the manifest file explicitly and then see what is contained in there, and then you add in more details as necessary. Okay? And also, this declares a lot of important things, and then also permissions and so on, which as we go along, both in the course as well as in the lab, you will encounter different parts of the manifest file. You will see why you need to insert certain things into the manifest file at each point of time. So for the moment, realize that this file is a very important part of the application, and this is something that you need to pay attention to. Okay? Now, within the manifest file, as you saw, for every component that is included, you need to declare this component here. Now, obviously, if you read this, as you see, this is a structured file. It declares certain pieces of information in there. And this is, if you look at it as plain English, you can very easily read what is being declared here. And obviously, you understand what this is. This is the corresponding package information. It is Android applications are all in Java, so you need packages to be declared in Java. Now, if you ask me what a package is, don't worry about it. If you have taken a Java course, you know what a package is. If you haven't taken a Java course, package is a package. That's all that we need for the moment. Okay? You don't need to worry about the details, anything beyond the fact that you need to give a name to a package. Whenever you declare an application, whenever you create an application, you have to declare a name to the package. And by default, for all the applications that I create for the course, I always use the name HKUST. Well, actually, this should be changed to COM4521. This used to be 355 last year, so that's why it's called 355. So it should be HKUST.com4521. Because the package name has to be unique, And so I always associate these two as the first two parts of my package name. So you would see in all the examples that you will encounter, but those two being the first two parts. It's just a name, that's all, from the perspective, but a unique name so that it doesn't clash with anything else. And since we are creating these applications in our course, that's why I put those two there. If you want to have a unique name, you can attach your last name and your first name there to the package, and that'll be fine too. There's no problem at all in that particular case. Okay? Now, you declare the information about the application itself. After that, you talk about all the different components that are there within your application. And here, as you see, you have one activity that is declared here. The activity's name is welcome. So obviously there must be a corresponding file called welcome.java, where you would have extended the activity class in order to create this particular activity. So all activities require that you extend the activity class and then declare a certain number of methods inside those class. What are those methods and why do you need to declare them? I will come to that in one of the later slides. In addition, you have an intent filter here. What does this intent filter tell you? This intent filter says this particular activity is a main activity and it's also the launcher. One activity in every application has to be designated as the main activity, and this is the activity that will start up when the user launches the app, when the user touches the app. So that's one thing that you should always include within the manifest file. What does the intent filter do? I will come to that in a minute. This basically specifies what are all the different things for which this particular activity will respond to, will be started up and so on. An intent filter basically declares the capabilities of that particular component, of the particular activity, for example. Okay? For example, one filter may indicate that the activity is the entry point for the application. So that's essentially what this particular entry here is declaring, saying this is the main activity. So when the user tries to launch this app, that's the one that you're going to fire up in the first instance. So that always has to be there. Okay? And for example, another filter may declare that an action that the activity can perform on a particular type of data. For example, if your activity corresponds to if your component is something that can handle opening of a web page, then you declare that, say, this activity can handle the opening of a web page in case the Android system requests it. So, for example, different browsers that you install within your system, each one of those browsers in their manifest file would have declared a particular component there, but obviously it should be an activity, which will be declared saying, in case the user requests that a web page be opened, this is my activity, and this activity you can start up if required. Okay, that should be declared in the manifest file. Similarly, there are many other situations where you will declare capabilities of your activity. Now, at this moment, we are sticking only to the one simple example there. Later on, we might encounter many other situations where you will see other capabilities being declared for your activities. So, for example, if you declare a content provider there, you would say this content provider is willing to provide data, and then this is the kind of data that this content provider is willing to provide. That will be declared in the intent filter. If you want your content provider to be available for other users to be able to access from their applications. Again, those issues I'll explain as and when I come across examples of such usage. Okay. Now, if you do not have any if you do not have any intent filter declared for an activity, that is, there could be activities within or other components within your application that you declare in the manifest file, but you may associate no intent filters with them. In that case, that component should be started by explicitly invoking it. So which means that the only way you can start that component is by issuing an explicit intent with the name of the component in the second part of the intent request. Now, many of the components that you create in your application would fall into that category. You don't want them to be exposed outside. You may want those components to be only used within your application. In those cases, you simply declare them as components there, but associate no intent filter with them. So that way, only the other components within your application can invoke them. If you want a particular component to be available for other applications to invoke, then you have to associate an intent filter with that. That's the other part that you need to keep in mind. All right? Is it a little bit confusing at this moment? Or is it okay? If you didn't completely get it, that's okay. We'll come back to that point again and again and again. This intent filter will be reappearing at frequent intervals